G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with the next video in this build series of the Dimensional Submarines from Space Battleship Yamato. So I've got all my sub-assemblies of the kits on clips ready for priming, and so the upper part of the hull is all sort of ready to go. But before I prime the bottom part of the hull, I need to sort out these tubes and get them sort of glued into place so that they don't sort of wobble around or poke through. Now, before I take you through affixing the tubes, one thing that I've done beforehand is I've actually primed these aluminium tubes using SMS etch primer. So I find this stuff's really good for making sure the paint sticks really well to this aluminium tube. So the aluminium tube will be painted black, so I can do that at the same time as I'm priming the base, and then I'll mask off the tube and paint the rest of the kit. Now the hole that I've got in here, I've had to just make it a little bit bigger, just because when I first drilled it, it wasn't entirely straight, so the post was sort of on that angle. So I had to, wallow out the hole a little bit more to get it sort of straight. And the next thing is to make sure I can get it affixed in place so it's not going to move. Now I'm going to take one of these are cotton buds, but just with it's basically a toothpick with a sort of cotton bud end on them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to poke this down the end of the tube, and that's so that I don't get any of the two-part epoxy I'm going to use to affix it in place, that I don't get any of that sort of down in the tube blocking it. Now the stuff I'm going to use, I haven't actually used before. So this is by Infini, and it's called Premium Magic Putty. So like most epoxy putties, it's two-part, so you'll have the resin part and the hardener, and you've got to mix them together. This is a 1-to-1 ratio, so you use equal parts resin and hardener, and you mix it together. The reason I'm trying this stuff is because it actually has a real long working time. It has a 2-hour working time. Most of the stuff that I've used in the past, it's usually sets pretty quickly. So I kind of like the idea that you've got a bit of time to work with this stuff. The issue though with that is that it takes a long time for it to fully cure. So you need to leave it sort of overnight. Whereas some of the other two-part epoxies I've used, they sort of cure reasonably quickly. But for me, it's going to be worth giving this stuff a shot, I think. So a couple of things to sort of have handy in place are a toothpick, which I'm going to use for basically poking the epoxy putty down into the gaps, make sure it sort of gets packed in properly. The other thing is to have some water ready, because like all two-part epoxy putties, a bit of water on your fingers can help make it a bit more malleable. Now the magic putty comes in 2 bags. Let's open these up. It's not the most pleasant stuff to look at, to be perfectly honest. And I'm not sure which is which. I suspect this is the hardener, and this is the resin, but I'm not entirely sure, so I could be wrong there. So what I want to do is pick out just a bit of it. I don't need very much. So, and I'm going to roll it into a little ball, so I get an idea of the amount of the other part I need to get. Alright, so I'm going to get a bit of water on my fingers, just dab off the excess, mix the two together. And so you shouldn't see sort of any variation in the colour across the putty. Should be all the same colour. So one of the parts is sort of a greeny colour, the other part is grey. So you just want to sort of knead it in, and I've definitely made too much here, but that's alright. It's I may be able to use it for some of the other posts. Now it's starting to get a little bit sticky, and they sort of say in the instructions that when that happens, just dunk your fingers in a bit of water and start moulding it again, and it just makes it a bit easier to just sort of knead in your fingers. But I think that's getting pretty good. Feels like it feels like tough blue tack. Like it's actually quite malleable. You can sort of see how, yeah, it's quite easy to mould into place. Some epoxy putties I've used are a little bit tougher than this stuff, so kind of like this is a bit more kneadable. Alright. So now I should be able to start getting some of this where I need it for the post. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shove it down in that hole there, and then use the toothpick to sort of mush it down in place. So I'm sort of forcing it down into the cavity, trying to pack it so that it keeps the tube in place. And at the same time, I want it reasonably neat. I don't want a whole bunch of sort of jaggedy bits poking up. So that's one side. Now if I take a bit for the other part, I'm really forcing the stuff in there. I don't have to worry about accidentally filling in the tube, because I've got that stick in place there. Trying to make it as square as possible. It's probably not going to be perfect, but I'll give it a shot. Alright, so I'm going to leave that dry overnight, and then I can show you the results of it. Okay, the two-part epoxy putty is still drying, but you can see the hole through there, through the tube. So it's still setting, but what I wanted to show you was the work I've done on the boxes, or the bases. And just a reminder, I didn't mention it at the start of the video, but just a reminder that this is the 1/1000 Bandai Dimensional Submarine Set, which includes 4 of the submarines at this size. And I'm also building the Mecha Colle version of the Dimensional Submarine, so that's at that size, slightly smaller. Alright, now I mentioned in the last video that I use these clear acrylic boxes, and I think I might have to see if I can source these in black, because that would make my life a bit easier. But these are they're a bit over sort of 2 inches, I think, cubed, or about 5 centimeters cubed, and they're called gift boxes, acrylic gift boxes, because they have this sort of lid on them, and you can pick them up pretty cheap on AliExpress, so that's where I got mine from. You can get these in different sizes, so if you wanted a bigger base to put your model on, then you could do that. What I like about these is that I've got plenty of room for the wiring to go in here, and I can also fit an Arduino board in here if I need to, so I kind of like these size boxes. Alright, so that's what they sort of look like before I've done anything to them. What I've gone ahead and done is drilled the holes in them. So you can see that there are 2 different size holes, and the reason for that is because one of them will be for a switch, and I don't want to sort of push that in all the way, because it will it'll stay in there, I'll never get it out. And the other hole is for a USB-C socket, so that will provide the power, and then of course we've got the on-off switch. So inside here is just a matter of sort of having the wires come through from the LEDs, wire up a resistor, wire up the switch, and we're good to go. I've sort of gone off using batteries. I kind of figure that in the case of these things, if I ever wanted to sort of display them, you know, at a model show or something like that, I can always use a USB battery bank. I don't need to. The coin cell batteries, you know, they're a bit hit and miss as to how long they'll actually last. So they're the two holes on the side. So to drill these holes out, I used a step drill, which looks like this, and so you can drill at different diameter holes. This one's sort of odd numbers, so it's sort of 9, 11, 13, 15, because I found I need to drill an 11mm and a 15mm hole. So using the step drill, I did this on my pedestal drill, you know, with the box in a clamp and everything like that. The good thing about a pedestal drill, of course, is that the drill bit will go straight down, so you'll get a nice, you know, a hole that's aligned properly. Now for the top, where the post is going to go, I drilled a 3mm hole because the aluminium tube that I use is 3mm in diameter. And so the idea is it just sits in there like that. And so the wires will go through that, and it's a reasonably elegant solution. So the base, the box itself, I'll paint that black along with the post, but you just get an idea of what that looks like. Now this is for the 1/1000 versions of the Dimensional Submarines. The Mecha Colle version, if you've watched my previous video on the build, you'll know that I mounted the post in a slightly different spot. It's actually where the post should go for the stand that comes with the kit. So instead of, if I were to mount this in the middle of one of these boxes, it would look a bit strange. It sort of hangs way over the edge like that. So what I've decided to do, and you can see I've had to do a bit of filling and sanding here. There's a fill mark or a pour mark here where they pour the acrylic, the molten acrylic, into the mold, and so that has it's right in the middle, and it's fine for these ones where the hole goes through the middle because it won't really be seen. But where I've had to drill a hole sort of offset, then yeah, I have to sort of fill this in. So for this one, it will be mounted like so. That way it'll be a little bit more, the craft will be a bit more centered in the base. So that's essentially the bases. I am still waiting for the epoxy putty to cure, and I'm going to leave that for a day, and then I can go ahead, give everything a bit of a clean, just a brush down with a soft brush, and then I can start priming everything black. So everything will start with SMS black primer, and then I'll talk about the colours that I want to use for the kits. Okay, let's start to look at the colours I want to use. I've already primed everything with SMS Surfacer Black. So this stuff here. And what I need to do before I sort of paint any further, I need to mask off the posts because I want them to be black. So I'll mask them off before I do any further painting. But there's a couple of things that I want to sort of point out and show you the colours that I want to use. First of all, for the 1/1000 version of the kit, of course, we get these clear parts with the decals on them, so I don't have to worry about painting any of that detail in. However, for the Mecha Colle version of it, I am going to have to paint it in because we don't get the equivalent clear part. So for that, it's going to be really difficult to see, but that little bit there is where the collectors are. That's what I need to paint, and it's actually quite small. So I'm going to start off by painting it just with a little bit of white, and then I'm going to go over it in clear yellow, and then finally I'm just going to dust it with a bit of SMS clear orange. And so that way I should be able to get that gradated colour within that area. So that's what I need to do for that one, just for the Mecha Colle version. Now for the rest of the colours, I'm sort of going off the colour reference on the 1/1000 kit here, and they refer to 3 colours. They've got like the upper part, which is a mix of blue, grey, white and a few others. So that's for the top section. Now for that I'm going to use SMS Foliage Green, so PL78. It's just because it's got a little bit of blue in it. I know it will go a little less intense than that once I put a matte coat on it, so I think it'll be a lot closer. In fact, I suspect it's probably going to be closer to what we have on the cover here, which I'm sort of more happy about, this sort of colour. So that's what I'll be using for the top part. For the bottom part, again, they refer to a mix of colours, so they don't specify just one colour. But for that, I will be using SMS RAF Dark Grey, PL220. And again, this looks pretty light, but it will go a little bit darker once it's dry and once it's got a matte coat on it. Now the interesting thing, I always thought these things were sort of 2 colours, but looking at the colour guide, they refer to a 3rd colour and they just have grey parts here, so it's not actually that helpful. But if you have a look at the inset here, you can see that the ends of the, I assume these are the propulsion screws or whatever they are, they're actually a different grey. So they're sort of a warmer grey compared to the underside, so I will need to paint them separately. The other thing is, it's really hard to tell in these pictures, and there's sort of no real indication in the instructions, but I suspect the top part, the top grey part of the deck, probably should be the same grey as these screws here, and same for the little engine part. So for that, I'm going to use SMS Gunship Grey, PL121. So I'll do like 4, like this little sort of intake detail here. There's also an area at the back here which I'll paint in the same grey, and then I can mask those areas off and paint the green. So I think that's the order I'll go in. So that's just a update on the colours I'll be using, and the next step is of course onto painting. Starting with the Mecha Colle version of the kit, you can see that I have sprayed the white, clear yellow and just a touch of clear orange on the end, just to get at least a little bit of gradation in there. I've also sprayed the grey in this rear area, and also on the caps here, which I've since masked. So then I can go in with the other grey to do the bottom part of it. Now I need to, of course, mask these areas off, and for that I am using blue tack. So you can see I've just sort of put a very small blue tack in there, and also on the side here. It's not going to give me a super clean line, but it's about the best I can do. The other thing is, it's going to be very hard to see, but I've sprayed grey in here, and I've actually sort of put just a little bit of tape. That's a detail that I doubt whether is even going to come up once it's all painted, but at least you can see that's what I've done. Now following on for the 1/1000 versions, I don't have to mask off the collectors on the side because they're separate clear pieces. I've had to spray grey in that little detail in there, and also on these rear parts. And for that, I've used a combination of blue tack for these sections and just the tiniest little bit of tape in there. So I don't know how effective it'll be, I won't know until I've sort of painted it, but at least I've given it a shot. I did consider brush painting it, but I think masking it I'll probably get a cleaner result. Worst case scenario, I can sort of go back and maybe try hand painting it, but Anyway, we won't know until we've given it a shot. So the next thing is to paint. Once I've finished the masking process, the next step is to, of course, paint the top parts, the sort of green colour, and the bottom parts in the grey. Now for painting the 1/1000 scale versions of the kit, I have painted the grey top parts using SMSPL 121 and also the engine caps. So I've separated them off, or the screw caps, whatever they are. I have taken them off and painted them separately. So this grey is different to what you'll see on the base of the ship. Okay, I've done the bulk of the painting now, so it's ready to sort of see how my masking went. I'm just going to start with the post. And of course I'm starting with the Mecha Colle version, so you can see the grey underneath there. And I've also masked the end caps for the engines. So let's have a look and see how they've turned out, and see if you can actually differentiate the grey. It'd be interesting to see how that comes up when I've put a matte coat on it. There is a little bit of a difference, but yeah, it's pretty minimal. The front here, we've got these green pieces that sort of slot in. Now I don't think these are pretty tight in the gap, so I don't think I'll need to put any glue in there, but that's sort of how they look. And that's essentially the bottom part sort of ready to go. Now you'll notice with the Mecha Colle version, with the post that I put in, I didn't actually need to put any epoxy in to hold in place. The pressure that I had to apply to get it in there, it sort of held in really tight. Okay, so onto the top part. I'm happy with the green. It's sort of a nice green with a tint of blue in it. So the next thing I need to do is take the grey bit and put the little green part on it. I want to get as much of it sort of together as possible, ready for a gloss coat, so I can do the panel line work on it. And we have the bridge sub-assembly. Okay, that's bedding down really nice. Yep. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now I need to take off this masking on the side here. So I just used blue tack for the facade collectors. So I don't expect this to be super clean, but there's not really a lot I can sort of do about it. Yeah, it's a little bit rough. Maybe when I get a panel line wash in there, it might sort of help border it, but I'm happy with the colour. Now that hint of orange makes a big difference. Oh, let's come up a lot cleaner. Alright, and then I've got to try and get these little bits out of the grey on the sides here. So these are tiny bits of masking tape. But I actually think that's come up alright. So it's very difficult to see, but it is grey in there. So yeah, so the next step is of course to give this a gloss coat, and then I can start on the panel line. So we've got the sort of two halves of the Mecha Colle version. Just make sure they still fit together. Yep. So that gives you sort of an idea what it looks like before it's glued together and before it's lit. So pretty happy with that one. Alright, on to the 1/1000 version. There's a lot of similarities between the masking of the Mecha Colle version and this version, which of course is the 1/1000. So first of all, unmask the base tube. Okay, so that's the grey for the bottom. Now, unlike the Mecha Colle version, the end caps on the rear pieces are separate, so I've been able to paint them separately, which means I can just push fit these on, and they don't. I don't think they'll need any glue. They go on there pretty well. Again, I can't see a huge difference in the grey, but hopefully once I get a matte coat down, it might show a little bit of a difference. Actually, it's coming up better on camera than it is in real life. But all right, so that's the bottom. I've got, of course, these two fins that go on the side. Again, I don't think these will need paint. I think they'll be fine. Sorry, glue. They won't need glue. They'll be fine just as push fit. So that's that part ready to go. Now for the top, we have the grey deck piece which goes in here. Then we have this piece that goes on here, and finally we have the bridge. Now that everything's had a layer of paint on it, not only is it sort of a tighter fit, but it looks as though it's closed up some of the gaps, which is really nice. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way that's come up. Okay, so we've got that, and then we have a little bit of masking, and I just remembered on the Mecha Colle version I need to do the same thing. There's one bit I forgot to unmask, which was the these rear pods. They have a grey section on them, so let's unmask that again, just with a bit of blue tack, and that's come up pretty good. It's just, it's grey in there. Now I should say I've left this paint to dry for probably a good 2 to 3 hours, so I'm not having any sort of paint lift or anything like that. It's all pretty good. With these tiny little pieces in here. Right, I think it was actually worth me masking them off. It does provides that extra little bit of detail in there. It's a slightly different colour. I mean, it is very, you know, a lot of it's sort of all the same colour, so it is nice that there's at least some accents of a slightly different colour to kind of break it up at least a little bit. Alright, so let's have a look at how this fits together. See if it indeed will still fit together. Yeah, I can certainly push it together a lot better, so once I get some glue in there, that will that should work pretty well, I think. Alright, so now it is time to unmask the rest of it and put down a gloss coat so that I can move on to the panel line wash and decals. Okay, I've put a gloss coat on everything, and so you can see it's all pretty shiny. So that is so that I can put down the panel line wash and also the decals. Now the decals, there's only sort of a minimal number of decals in this kit. There's one that sort of goes on the tower here and one that goes on the front, and that's about it for the 1/1000 scale ones. For this one, for the Mecha Colle version, there's no decals at all. Yeah, given there's so minimal decals on the 1/1000 version of the kit, I'm going to do all the panel lining first and then put the decals over the top, and it'll be fine. Alright, so I considered using my own custom made panel line wash using Tamiya enamels. So I sort of considered using XF61 dark green, but I did a bit of a test and it actually didn't really work that well. So I think I'll end up using this stuff, Tamiya's Panaline Accent Colour Black. So I think the colour's dark enough that black's probably going to work. Now, whenever you're using any sort of enamel-based products, you want to make sure you give them a really good shake because they do tend to separate. And any of you who've seen any of my previous videos, you know how this works. It's a pretty common technique. It's not like it's anything new, but basically you take the applicator and you just touch it to panel lines, and through capillary action it'll just follow those lines. Now you can see I'm making sort of big messes here, but that's fine because you can go back and clean them up afterwards. So nothing new here. I've done this with all my other kits, and yeah, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and do all the panel lining so you can see how messy that is, but in the next bit of the video I will show you how I go about cleaning all that up. You do have to be careful with Bandai kits using enamel products though, because it will soften pegs, and I've had bits break off before because of the enamel based products. So try to go fairly light on it. Sometimes it's not possible, but yeah, just be conscious of the fact that it can soften the plastic and make it really brittle, and especially those smaller sort of pegs, smaller pieces may break off. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of those, and then I'll come back and show you how to go about cleaning up all the panel lines. I've done what I call the first round of panel lining. Sometimes I find once I've cleaned it up I might need to go back and do a couple more spots that get washed out during the cleanup process, but that's all done. You can see I've made quite a mess there. So in order to clean up that mess I use Shellite. I've gone through this process many times before in my other videos, but you can use enamel thinner, for example from Tamiya. You can use odorless thinner, it's used for oil paints from Artist Supplies. As long as it's sort of enamel based, it will clean up just fine. What I normally do is take a cotton bud, a bit of paper towel, dunk the cotton bud in the Shellite, and then I will just gently rub over the surface. So you can sort of see there it's cleaned it up a little bit. Now with such a dark colour like this one, it actually helps to wet the surface down with the whatever enamel thinner you're using, and if you wet the surface it makes it a bit easier to sort of see where the splotches are that you've made that fall outside of the panel line. So I tend to find that helps on darker surfaces, especially if you've got like a dark grey or a dark green like this one. So you can see that sort of mess there. Let's go through and clean that up. Now some of it will come out of the panel lines, some of it will stay in there. But what you really want to do is clean up all those really obvious bits where you've where the panel liner has gone outside of the lines. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the cleanup on all the craft. And what I'll usually do is I'll do one pass where I clean it, and then I'll leave it for an hour or so, and then I'll come back and have another look over it. Inevitably I end up missing spots, but I do find I pick up a few patches, if I do a second pass. So that's the way I sort of go around cleaning up. Alright, after I've cleaned up the rest of them, then it'll be on to decals. The 1/1000 version of this craft comes with waterslide decals, which is fantastic. So you can see I've already started cutting some out. I've actually got some soaking. These ones here, there's one that goes on each side of the bow of the ship, and then you've got these ones here which go on the tower. Now, they also include these ones which go on the collectors, but I don't want to use them. I suspect they're not going to give me the result that I want, given that I'm sort of lighting this kit. So I think I'll end up using probably some clear orange instead of actually using these decals. But it is nice that they included them to give you that nice clean gradient there for the collectors on the side. So I've got a couple of the decals already soaking, and there's nothing terribly exciting about this process. These are tiny, these decals. They are really quite small, and the other thing is they have quite a bit of carrier film around the edges of them, so just be aware of that. If you really want to, you might sort of go ahead and you might go ahead and trim them a little bit, but I don't think it's really particularly worth it. Now, when I'm doing decals on something like this, I find it easier just to prop the model up with a bit of blue tack, so that way at least I'm sort of working on a fairly level surface. It makes it easier to locate the decal. I'm going to start by putting down some microset. So this is from Microscale Industries, and this helps reduce the surface tension of the decal going down. It also helps to soften the decal and adhere a little bit to the model. And then once the decal's down, I go over with Microsol, which helps to melt the carrier film, and it gives the decal a bit more of a painted on sort of surface, painted on look I should say. So I'm just going to put the tiniest amount of microset just down where the decal is going to go, and I use these type of tweezers which are Tamiya, and sort of specifically for decals. They've got that nice sort of flat nose on them, and what I'll do is pick up the decal. I've got a bit of paper here, a bit of paper towel, and I'll use that to wick off the excess water, and then using a toothpick I'll just go ahead and glide the decal to its location, move it around a little bit, and then I can just press down so that the decal, the water sort of squeezes out from underneath the decal. Now, the carrier film actually sort of sits proud of the edge, but that's alright because the Microsol will help to take that carrier film over the top of it and make it conform to the surface, so I'm not too concerned about that. Alright, the crest that goes on the bridge, you want to make sure that goes the right way. There is a top and a bottom to it, so just keep an eye on that. Move this around. I apologise if my voice sounds a little bit different. I'm just getting over a head cold. That's all that is. It's the first time I've actually got back into sort of modelling for the week. It's good. I'm starting to feel human again. Alright, so now they're in place, I will take the Microsol and using a brush I will apply it, and I want to be careful that I don't get too much on it that it sort of repositions the decal. And then I'll let that dry. The decal will wrinkle up a little bit while the Microsol does its thing, and it will flatten back out once it's dry, but then I'll apply multiple coats of Microsol. So I'll let it dry, apply another coat, basically until I can't see any kind of real obvious carrier film, and it gives that sort of painted on surface. So it means that when I put a flat coat over it, there's going to be less chance of getting any sort of silvering, which is air getting caught under that carrier film, and it gives like a silver appearance, which doesn't look great. So I'll get all the decals done on the others. I was considering using these decals for the Mecha Colle version because there are a couple of spares, but I decided against it because these are too big, so they don't look in scale on the Mecha Colle one. Can't get away with it. But I'll get the decals on all the 1/1000 scale kits, and then I'll give everything a flat coat with SMS Flat Clear, and then we'll be ready to sort of get onto the lighting and getting the two halves joined together. Okay, I need to do a little bit more work on these collector light pipe parts. I've attached the LEDs with UV resin, which I showed in the previous video, but I think I want to reduce the amount of light bleed that can potentially sort of come out the back of it. So I think what I'll do is I'll mask off the front just with a bit of blue tack, and then on the back I plan to paint first metallic aluminium, so hopefully the light sort of bounce around a little bit in there, and then some black on the back of it, just to really try to reduce the amount of light that leaks out the back of the LED. Because if I light this up, you'll see that it produces quite a bit of light, and a lot of that is sort of coming out the back there, so I want to sort of reduce that as much as possible. The other thing that I'm going to do is give it a light mist of clear orange just on the very end. So I've got this sort of yellow, but I just want a little bit of orange at the end, and that's to replicate, this is the Mecha Colle version, but it's to basically replicate that effect. And I also want to call out this stage too, just the border around this collector. It's kind of a bit confusing because some illustrations I see, they have actually masked around the edge of it and actually painted it green, and then it's just the inside bit. For me, I think I prefer having the whole thing there, just because it makes it a little bit more obvious. But for those of you who got sharp eyes who probably know this subject matter better than I have seen examples where the green is sort of masked around the edge. So anyway, I'm going to just do the whole thing in yellow and orange, and we'll see how we go from there. So I need to get these masked up. We're just going to use a little bit of blue tack, and it doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be sort of perfect. It's really just masking off the bit that I obviously don't want any paint on, but ensuring that the back of it I'll be able to paint. I have no idea how well this is going to work. I haven't actually tried it yet, so it could all be, you know, a complete failure. But hey, that's what you know, makes us better, isn't it? Alright, so just mask that off like that. Pretty rough, but it's just about covering up that back area. Alright, so I'll get those painted up, and then we can move on to the next step. Now the other thing I need to do is the lighting for the Mecha Colle version. Now if you remember in the previous video, I've actually got some 0.6mm diameter fibre optic in there, and what I need to do is attach an LED to both of those ends. I'm just going to use one LED, but basically I think I'll be able to, if I hold it right and use some UV resin, I should be able to get that in place properly. Now these fibre optics, they're just pressure fit, they're not sort of glued in place or anything. But once I get the LED in place, what I want to do is just do a bit of light blocking. So again, I want to reduce any sort of light coming out of where it's not supposed to, just in case I can't get a perfect seal between the two halves. Alright, so for this one, I'm going to use my favourite cheap UV resin. I've got my, some stuff out of the way, I've got my UV torch. So I'm going to turn that on in preparation, and I have one of these LEDs, which is a 0603 warm white 3 volt SMD LED. And I think I need to set this up somehow. Trying to work out how I can get that on camera too. Okay, let's see if we can put it up on its end. It might be a bit easier. So something like that. And I'm going to have to try and line up these
fibre optic so I can get the LED to sort of attach to both of them. Okay, so moment of truth. I'll try and work out the best way of doing this. So I'm going to get some UV resin. I'm going to dunk the LED in the UV resin. So get plenty on there. And then I'm going to try and line this up and hit it with a UV torch at the same time. And the good thing about this UV resin is it's actually a little bit brittle. So if this doesn't work, I can kind of break it off and do it again. You could do the same thing with super glue, I guess, but I just find this UV resin, it's really convenient to sort of, set it up first. You've got plenty of time to set it up, and then you can just hit it with the torch and it just sets. So now we can have a look at how well that actually worked. And yeah, so you can see that's working quite nicely. And you can also see I need to do a lot of light blocking in there. But the good thing is that I know that it works. So now I should be able to essentially, because what I want to do is hold this down so it's against the top. And again, I should be able to use some UV resin for this. Not quite sure how that will hold down, but we will push on. I'll try and get these wires fed through the tube so we can actually sort of have a look at what it looks like. Just need to make sure that these wires don't pinch. I'm not caught out with wires getting caught where they're not supposed to be. That might be enough to make it happen. So if I try and close it up now, this is the bottom part. So if I feed the wire through, there is a gap in the middle, but when I glue it I'll be able to close that up. So we'll probably see some light leaks coming out in the seam here. Yeah, but that looks pretty good. But you can see that light flickering in there, so you can see there's that sort of light leak going on. So what I think I'll do is use some fabric paint to deal with that. Alright, so I'm just going to use some tulip black fabric paint. This stuff's good because it's nice and thick. It's got a good applicator to be able to get sort of the paint in there. So basically I want to fill that entire area where the LED is, so that the light only comes out through the fibre optic. And that way if there's any slight gaps between the two halves, you won't be able to see that light. So I'm getting those two lights there, but nothing there. Okay, so I reckon the Mecha Colle one's pretty much ready to go. I just need to sort of matte coat everything, and then I can do the the gluing of the two halves together. So that's good, that's a win, I'll take that. Just clip this up so it set it up for the fabric paint to dry. So the next part is of course painting the lighting parts for the 1/1000 kits, and then we can sort of see how that's all going to fit and work. Okay, just to show you the finished light pipes for the collectors on the side, you can see that I've painted the silver first, then the black on the back of them. I painted a little bit of orange on the top edge there, it's a little bit hard to see, and then I gave the whole lot a matte coat. So I've also, for the bodies of the craft,
they've all got a matte coat now. I still have a little bit of silvering on some of the decals, so it's pretty minor, but you can see it, so I'm a little bit disappointed with that. Not much I can do about it now though. So now it's a matter of sort of installing the lights, and the way I'm going to do that is take the base and take one of these light pipes, put it in place. Now that it's had a bit of paint in there on the back of it, it actually sits in quite nicely. And then it's a matter of sort of feeding the wires through the tube that's going to go into the base. Okay, so I've got that one in. Then the second one. And of course there is a left and right to these things. So you do need to be careful installing them, that you're installing them the right way. And then again, feed the wires down through the tube to go to the base. Alright, now I think I should have enough room in there that the wires won't get crimped now, but we'll see. Try and get these two halves together. So there it is together. You can still see that gap there, but once I glue it and squeeze it, that gap should disappear. So I'm not sure what it is that's causing that. I don't think it's the wires, but anyway, once I glue that, that should fix that up. Okay, so just a bit of a test. So you see how that's looking? It's looking pretty good. Now, might be a bit hard to see, but I can see a bit of light leaking in that gap there, so I want to sort of take care of that. And I'm just going to use some of the fabric paint again. So I've already got some sort of ready to go here, and I'm going to take a fairly sizable dab and just put it around the LED, both sides, just to make sure. And then I'm going to take a bit and just run along the top of the light pipe here. The reason is that when I dry fit these pieces together previously, notice there's a little bit of a gap there, and if I can fill that just with a bit of black paint at this stage, it's kind of my best option, I think. Okay, so I'll let this fabric paint dry, and of course I need to do the process for the other three 1000 versions of the kit, and then I can, once that's dry, I can get the two halves together. Alright, after a lot of messing around, I got the two halves stuck together, and the wires have been fed down through the tube and just sitting here in the base box. So I still have some gaps where the two halves are joined. And I've noticed with some of them testing, there's a little bit of light leak in some of them, so just goes to show, you know, I tried to light block it as best as possible, but it doesn't always work as well as I'd like it to. So this is the 1000 kit. You can see the light pipes, you know, they look pretty good even without the lights turned on, so I'm pretty happy with those. Decals, you know, you can sort of, when they're tiny. There's a little bit of silver in there, but it's not too bad. For the Mecha Colle version, of course this one looks a little bit different just because it's smaller, and it's also hasn't got the light pipe at the front for the collectors. But same thing, I've just basically put the wires through the box. So the next step is to take some electronic components to hook up the power and a switch. Now, the way this works is going to be a very simple circuit. I've sort of covered it in other videos before, so I won't be showing the soldering on camera. But essentially you have the positive from the LEDs, you have resistors on the positive part of the LEDs, go to one point on the switch, and then you have a positive coming out of the switch. It goes to the power supply. So the switch basically interrupts the, in this case it'll be the positive part of your circuit. The negative is nice and straightforward. That just connects straight up to the negative of each LED. So that's really all it is. There's not a huge amount in it. And so I'm going to do that off camera, and next I'll show you the result of that. Okay, I've wired everything up, ready to go. So just to give you a quick look of what they look like once they've been lit up. I've got the USB connection on the back here. It's just a USB-C. Plug that in. Got the switch. And then if I turn this around, it's probably a bit hard to see, but there is actually a light coming out of there. So coming out of both collectors, which is nice. So that's the Mecha Colle version of the kit, and I'll start with this one. This kit's a really nice kit. It's nice, simple to put together, as a lot of the Mecha Colle kits are. Not a lot of detail parts to really worry about. The only one is the periscope here, which you can knock off, and I have done on this and the other kits. But it's really quite straightforward to put together. Now, if you want to light this particular version of the kit, you will have to sort of drill some holes and stuff. It doesn't come with any clear parts like the 1000 version. But if you're happy to use sort of some fibre optic, you shouldn't have too many problems. There is actually plenty of room in the guts of this one to sort of drill it out and put your lighting in there. But it's a simple paint job. It's not like a lot of masking or anything like that, so it's reasonably straightforward, and really enjoyed this one. Now, moving on to the 1000 kits. These ones, of course, are a little bit different, just in the fact they're a little bit bigger, but they also have the clear collector part. So it makes it a little bit more straightforward to light it. However, the construction of this is a little bit different to the Mecha Colle version, so you will have to do a bit of work if you want to sort of, reduce the amount of masking you want to do. So let's light this one up and have a look. And so you can see it lights up really well. It does blow out a little bit on camera. You can see I've got a little bit of light leak there, and that's evidence that I didn't get the two halves together as much as I would have liked. But I'm actually reasonably happy with that. So of course you've got the other side as well. I think overall it took me between 35 and 40 hours to put these 5 kits together and get them to the stage ready for photography. So just to give you an idea how long it took. Great kits, highly recommend them. And on that note, time for the glamour shots. So until next video series, I'll catch you later.